My boots still had this morning's mud on them. Every other pair of shoes in that ballroom cost more than my first tractor. And my own father stood up, lifted his glass, smiled at 200 guests, and asked the room when a farmer would ever afford a wedding like this one. He had no idea I had paid for every flower in the room. He had no idea what was about to walk into his company 2 weeks later, or what it would cost him to find out. My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 34 and I grow food for a living. This is the story of the night my family finally saw me, and why I almost wished they hadn't. At 4 that morning, before any guest had opened an eye, I was standing in a cold greenhouse with a knife in my hand, cutting the last of the white orchids for my brother's wedding. I wrapped the stems in damp cloth myself and loaded 40 crates into the truck myself, because I don't ask my crew to lose sleep for family favors. Every flower in that ballroom came from my soil. So did the greens under the appetizers and the herbs in the sauce nobody could name. I had wired $40,000 to the caterer 3 weeks earlier on one condition: that nobody ever learned where it came from. My brother Andrew was getting married, and I wanted the day to be beautiful more than I wanted the credit. I told myself that wasn't weakness. It was safety. I had learned a long time ago in my family that being seen and being safe were two different things, and I had chosen safe. So I stood at the back of the room in muddy boots and let 200 strangers assume I was staff. To understand my father, you'd have to see the building with his name on it. Bennett Provisions, 40 years of packaged goods and private label groceries, with his portrait hanging in the lobby. My sister Rebecca runs it beside him now. Between the two of them, they had long ago decided what our family name was supposed to mean. Glass towers. The right watch. A seat at a restaurant where one plate costs more than a farmhand earns in a day. My mother never fit that definition, and she never tried to. She grew up on land north of the city, 60 acres her own father left her. And when she married into money, she kept the deed in her own name, like a woman keeping one door unlocked just in case. She used to take me out there on Sundays and press seeds into my palm. The dirt doesn't care what your last name is, she'd say. Only whether you show up. She died when I was 19. At the end, in a hospital bed, she took my hand and gave me the land. 60 acres, and one warning I didn't understand until years later. Don't ever let anyone price you by the size of their wallet. My father got nothing from her but a widower's black suit. Rebecca inherited her ambition and pointed it in the opposite direction. I inherited the dirt, and the name that had actually come down my mother's side of the family, not his. Nobody in that ballroom understood that the name they were so proud of belonged to the soil first. Rebecca found me near the coat check before the ceremony, the way a hawk finds a mouse. She looked me over from my boots to my braid, then lifted my hand into the light so 2 women beside her could see the calluses. "You can wash the dirt off your hands," she said, smiling so the others would think it was affection. "But everyone can still smell the barn." The women laughed the small laugh people give powerful women. I took my hand back and didn't wipe it on my dress, though every nerve in me wanted to. I'd earned those calluses over 15 years. I wasn't going to be ashamed of them at my own brother's wedding. The ceremony was lovely. Andrew cried, and so did I, quietly, from the back where nobody keeps score. At dinner, they sat me at table 11, near the kitchen doors, beside a business associate of my father's who asked the question people ask at weddings. "And what do you do?" I opened my mouth. My father answered before I could. "Clara plays in the dirt," he said, warm and dismissive at once, "the way you describe a hobby that got out of hand. Grows vegetables. Sells them at those little markets. We keep hoping she'll get tired of it." The man chuckled and turned back to his wine. I could have said I supplied 4 regional grocery chains. I could have said I employed 31 people year-round and 90 in season, and that his own plate that night had come out of my ground. Instead, I reached for my water and let it go, because I'd decided long ago that a person who has to announce her worth at a dinner table has already lost the argument. That was the story I told myself. The truth is I was afraid that if I laid it all out and they finally looked impressed, the respect would be for the numbers, not for me. My father took my silence as agreement and stood to give his toast. He thanked everyone for coming to a celebration worthy of the Bennett name. And then he let his eyes travel the orchids, the crystal, the band, all of it mine, and decided to be clever. Family means everything to me, he said. From the boardroom, his glass tipped an inch toward my table, to the farm. My youngest daughter grows vegetables, and bless her, she works hard at it. But I look around at all this and I have to ask, when will a farmer ever afford a wedding like this? The room laughed. 200 people laughing at the girl in muddy boots, while a camera on a tripod panned slowly across my face. I set down my fork. I didn't stand. I didn't correct him. Something in me that had been bending for 15 years finally, quietly, broke. Andrew found me by the kitchen doors 20 minutes later, wrecked with guilt. He'd learned about the flowers. His new wife had recognized the orchids, and the caterer had let something slip. "Did you pay for all this?" he asked. I could have lied. I looked at my little brother, the boy who used to fall asleep in my truck bed on the way home from our mother's land, and I couldn't. "Don't tell them," I said instead. "Promise me. If they know, it changes what tonight was, and I don't want it to change." He didn't understand it. But he nodded because it was his wedding and I'd asked him to. The drive home took 90 minutes of dark highway with the radio off. Somewhere past the last gas station I finally let myself feel it. For 15 years I had believed that if I just worked hard enough, built something solid enough, the work would eventually speak loud enough that my father would have to hear it. That night I finally understood he wasn't failing to see my worth. He'd eaten it off a plate an hour earlier. He simply didn't count it because it came out of the ground instead of a spreadsheet. No harvest was ever going to change the arithmetic in his head. I pulled into my own gravel drive a little after midnight and sat looking at my 60 silver acres under a half moon, letting the last of that hope die. Then my phone lit up on the passenger seat. An office line calling at midnight. It wasn't my father. It was Helen Carter, who runs operations at my farm. Steady, unshakable, and someone who never calls this late. "Nothing's wrong," she said quickly. "Something's right. Bell & Crane Foods wants to talk. Not a trial order, Clara. A full regional supply contract. Multi-year. Exclusive." I sat up straight in the dark cab. Bell & Crane isn't a farmer's market account. It's a national company, the kind whose products sit on shelves in every state, the kind that could take everything my farm grew and ask for more. "When do they want to meet?" I asked. "Next week," Helen said. Then she hesitated, which she never does. "There's a partner company involved on the distribution side." The sourcing lead was careful about who. "Big name. They want everyone in one room to sign the whole structure at once." I stared out at my dark fields, a strange cold moving through my chest. A farmer's instinct for weather she can't yet see. "Set the meeting," I said. "I'll be there." 2 days later I sat across from George Foster, the CEO of Bell & Crane, in an office with a view of the whole valley. He didn't flinch at my calluses. He looked at them for a second, and something like respect crossed his face. "So you're the one," he said. "I've been eating your tomatoes for 3 years without knowing your name." He laid it out plainly. His company needed a regional organic supplier who could hit volume, and after 8 months of searching, there were exactly 2 operations that could meet the spec, and one had already said no. "That leaves you," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "If we build this line, we build it with Bennett Farms, or we don't build it here at all." I opened the folder to see the terms, and that's when I found the second name listed as the distribution and co-packing partner, printed in the same plain font as everything else. Bennett Provisions. My father's company. My sister's company. George Foster was building a supply chain that ran straight through my father's plant, and neither end of it had any idea the other end was me. I closed the folder. My hands were steady. I was anything but. For 15 years I had kept my 2 lives in separate fields. The farm on one side, the family on the other, and I had worked very hard to make sure they never touched. Now a stranger in a corner office had drawn a straight line between them, in ink, and handed me the pen. I learned the rest of it slowly, the way you learn a field is flooding, not all at once but piece by piece until the whole shape is clear. Bennett Provisions was 40 years old and slipping, undercut by cheaper competitors carrying too much debt. This contract wasn't a nice new account for my father. It was a lifeline. Without the volume it would push through his plant, the company he'd built, the company that let him stand in a ballroom and pity me, might not survive the year. And it depended entirely on a supplier only I could provide. That Sunday was the anniversary of my mother's death, and every year my father hosts a dinner for it. I almost didn't go, but I wanted to see him before the meeting. Halfway through, loosened by wine, he couldn't help himself. "We're on the edge of something big," he announced to the table. "Biggest contract in the company's history. It closes next week. Puts us back where we belong." He never said we were drowning. He didn't have to. A man who announces he's about to be saved is a man who knows how close he came to going under. He raised his glass to my mother, to the company, to the future, and never once looked at me and thought to ask what I'd been up to. Rebecca called me 2 days later. Not a text, an actual call, which she never does. "I know you've got your little farm thing," she said, breezy and bright. "But are you free Thursday and Friday? We're doing a big cleanup at the plant before a client walkthrough, and we're short bodies. You're used to physical work. You'd probably be faster than the temps. I could get you 20 an hour cash." My sister, co-CEO of a company about to be saved by my signature, was offering me $20 an hour to stack boxes for the client walkthrough. A client that, though she didn't know it, was the very deal running through my fields. "You can wash the dirt off your hands, Clara," she added, laughing like it was a joke. "But you might as well put them to good use." I told Helen about it the next morning over coffee. She listened to all of it, the toast, the folder, the warehouse offer. And then she said the thing I'd been afraid to say to myself. "So don't sign. These people have spent your whole life stepping on you. Let them sink. You don't owe them your name." She wasn't wrong. That was the trouble. Part of me wanted it badly, to sit in my farmhouse and let the tower crumble and feel nothing but quiet. But I kept picturing the 200 people my father employed. The drivers. The woman at the front desk who'd been there since I was a kid. They hadn't toasted at any wedding. They'd just lose their jobs. And under that, something uglier I had to admit to myself. If I let my father drown to prove a point, I'd be measuring him exactly the way he'd always measured me. I'd win the argument by becoming the ruler. "Don't argue with the ruler," my mother had told me once. "Don't become it either." "I don't know yet what I'll do," I told Helen. "But letting them drown so I can feel righteous, that's not refusing to be measured. That's just measuring back." The night before the signing, Bell and Crane's office sent a confirmation email asking each party to name their principal signatory in writing. For 15 years I had done business from behind a curtain, contracts filed under an LLC, Helen sent to sit across from buyers, my own name living only inside a federal organic certification database that nobody but a sourcing team would ever think to search. It had kept my two worlds apart. It had kept me safe. I read the email 4 times. Then I typed, "Clara Bennett, owner, Bennett Farms, will attend and sign on behalf of the supplier." I hit send before I could talk myself out of it, and felt the click of it go out into the world. Irreversible, like a gate swinging shut behind you on a road you can't walk back up. The morning of the meeting I dressed like myself. A clean chambray shirt, dark jeans, good boots scrubbed of mud but unmistakably work boots. I cut an armful of wildflowers from the fence line my mother had planted 30 years ago, black-eyed Susans, Queen Anne's lace, and set them in a mason jar on the passenger seat next to the folder. I wasn't going to make a speech with them. I just wanted something of hers in the room. Bell and Crane's headquarters was 40 stories of glass downtown. I parked my mud-crusted truck between two black sedans and carried my jar of weeds across a marble lobby while people's eyes slid right off me. A woman in work boots, clearly lost, clearly staff. Rebecca spotted me in the hallway before I reached the conference room, sharp in the finest suit I'd ever seen her wear. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, steering me away from the glass doors. "This is the most important meeting in the company's history. You cannot be here. Just go home, I'll call you after." An assistant appeared at her elbow. "Ms. Bennett, they're ready. Mr. Foster is asking for the supplier's representative." I stepped past my sister toward the doors. "That's me," I said. The conference room was glass and pale wood. The valley spread out 40 floors below. My father sat at the far end in his best suit, gray-faced, hands folded. A man dressed up to negotiate but sitting like a man about to beg. Place cards sat at each seat. Halfway down the supplier's side, one read Bennett Farms in front of an empty chair. I walked to it. I set my mason jar of wildflowers on the polished table among the leather folios, and I sat down in the seat that was mine. The room went quiet in stages. My father's face moved through not understanding, then the beginning of it, then a horror that reached all the way to his lips. Rebecca stopped dead in the doorway, looked at the card, looked at me, and watched her whole afternoon collapse behind her eyes. Nobody spoke. Then the far door opened and George Foster walked in, already scanning for the faces that mattered. He gave my father a courteous nod, the nod you give a partner you're about to save, and then his eyes found me behind the Bennett Farms card, and his whole manner changed. He crossed the room to my end of the table, not my father's, and clasped my hand in both of his. "It's an honor," he said in front of everyone, "to finally meet the owner of Bennett Farms." The silence that followed was total. My father's mouth had come open. Rebecca made a small sound, not quite a word. "I've been trying to get in a room with you for 2 months," Foster went on, oblivious to the earthquake he'd caused. "Your operation is the entire reason this deal exists. There isn't another supplier in this state who could carry what we're building." He gestured down the table toward my father. "Mr. Bennett, I understand you two share a name. Small world. Good name to have on both ends of a supply chain." Nobody laughed. "You're Clara," Rebecca said, her voice too high. "You're the supplier." "I'm the supplier," I said level, the same voice I used to quote a price on tomatoes. "Bennett Farms. 60 acres north of the city. 31 people year-round, 90 in season. Organic certified for 11 years. I looked at my father. "Mom's land. The dirt I play in." Rebecca recovered fast, almost impressively fast. The horror in her face reorganized itself into something warm and oily, and she turned to Foster with the exact polish she'd used on the women at the wedding. "Isn't this wonderful? My little sister, we're so proud of what she's built. We've supported her from the very beginning." I let it sit there unchallenged. I had the floor, I had the leverage, I could have laid the whole toast out in front of the lawyers and watched her shrink. I heard my mother instead. "Don't argue with the ruler. Don't become it." So I turned to Foster and said, "Should we talk about terms?" We talked about terms. 3 years exclusive, close to $18 million in total value, with Bennett Provisions handling packaging and distribution on the back end. I watched my father do math he should have done 15 years earlier. Every number Foster said was a number that ran through my fields first. When Foster asked if everyone was ready to sign, my father spoke for the first time. His voice wasn't the voice from the ballroom. It was small and it shook. "Clara, I want you to come into the company properly. Not just this contract, the farm too. Put your name on the door beside mine. Bennett and Bennett. You've more than earned it. Whatever I said, I want to make it right. Come home." Everything I had wanted since I was 19 years old, laid on the table between the water glasses and my mother's wildflowers. Rebecca spoke before I could, her voice suddenly stripped of all its polish. "He never said that to me. 30 years I ran beside him, built the numbers, closed every deal. He never once told me I'd done a good job. She looked at me, and for one unguarded second there was no contempt in her face at all, just a tired, hollow envy. She wasn't the author of our family's cruelty. She was its oldest victim, still measuring herself with the same ruler that had cut us both. I turned back to my father and understood exactly what was being offered. Not love, a promotion arriving the very minute I became useful, the very minute my worth showed up on his ledger. If I said yes, I'd finally belong. At the price of agreeing his ruler had been right all along. I'll sign the contract, I said. Your people keep their jobs, all 200 of them, and I'm glad to do it. This isn't revenge. But I won't come into the company, and I won't put my name on your door. I stood and picked up the mason jar. I already have a gate. My mother built it, and it opens for anyone willing to get their hands dirty. I signed first on the supplier's line, Clara Bennett, owner, and shook George Foster's hand. Then I left the wildflowers where they were, right in the middle of that polished table, so the room would have to look at something honest for the rest of the meeting. Clara! My father's voice cracked behind me as I reached the door. Please. I stopped, one hand on the glass, but I didn't turn around. You didn't lose me at the wedding, I said. You lost me a long time before that. But the gate's open. It always was. You just have to be willing to walk out to where I am. Then I walked through it, past Rebecca's stunned assistant, down 40 floors and out into the afternoon sun. The contract held. Bennett Provisions got its lifeline. 200 people I'll probably never meet kept their jobs. The only part of saving my father I've never once regretted. My father sent a letter 3 weeks later. Not quite an apology. More like a man trying to learn a language late in life, clumsy and incomplete. I wrote back because a cracked door is still a door. He drove by the farm once that fall. Helen saw his car slow at the gate and idle there a long minute before he drove on. He wasn't ready yet. I left the gate open anyway. Rebecca surprised me most. A month later she texted, not a favor, not a barb. Just that the wedding flowers had been beautiful, and that she was sorry. That's all. We may never be close. But she'd finally seen the flowers, and from her, that was practically a bouquet. Andrew started coming out to the farm that spring, first to help, then because he liked it. By summer he was asking real questions about soil and seasons. He and his wife are talking about moving out this way so their kids grow up knowing which end of a seed goes down. The ruler that measured us all is still out there. I didn't destroy it. But it isn't getting handed down through this gate anymore. I hung a small wooden sign at the entrance that spring. Nothing fancy, just my mother's words burned into a plank of cedar I cut myself. Because here is the one thing 15 years in a boardroom taught me. Respect you have to buy was never respect at all. It was rent. And I was finally done paying it.